welcome back. I've got Justin Bookey online. Justin, how you doing today?
Doing great, man.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we'll jump right into this conversation.
Sure thing. I was born in Seattle, Washington, very rainy place. So we had a lot of time indoors and early dark afternoons. That was perfect to hang out in the family room, basement, play ping pong. I had three older sisters who were pretty competitive too. So a lot of family battles I fondly remember. And yeah, the game stuck with me and I've played ever since I was about 6 years old.
And you've done quite well in that, and you've had great mentors in the game and played internationally, thrived internationally, and then kind of segued into the work you're doing today. And obviously we want to talk about the book. And as we briefly discussed during the pre-show, uh, the synergies between playing a game like ping pong and leadership, there's a lot more than I think people would think. So why don't you let's dive into the book. I always ask authors this because I interview a ton of them on the show. What motivated you to write a book? Because there's always a story behind the stories. So, what was the thinking behind spending so much time to create a book? And then obviously, we'll jump into, the contents of the book.
Sure. Having been involved in the game from a really early age, here's the book, by the way, Ping Pong Leadership. Uh, I realized again, ever since age of 6, I was playing this game and I was just drawn to it. And I was a shrimpy kid. I couldn't really play football or basketball without getting smashed around. And so naturally, this was a great one. And I played soccer and other sports. But as I went through school and then grad school, became a lawyer and then digital strategist, marketer, and filmmaker even, I was always playing table tennis on the side. And I played competitively and I studied really hard at the game, even while I was working really hard on building a career in more of a classic profession. I always kept these two channels of my life very separate. They they crossed over occasionally at work. Maybe we had a table at a large advertising agency or so forth. I loved to play there. Even did some job interviews while I was playing ping pong. I would interview candidates. The two worlds were pretty separate. And then finally it dawned on me 12, 15 years ago. I had seen amazing leaders succeed in table tennis, and I had learned from some of the best in table tennis, Olympians, world champions, national champions. And I was lucky enough also to learn from amazing leaders in business, CEOs of Qualcomm and X Prize, and people like Nolan Bushnell, who founded Atari. Amazing thinkers and pioneers. And they had all had their struggles and they had overcome them and just really crashed through new barriers in their worlds. I had realized that the principles each side had used to succeed were remarkably similar. There was so much overlap. It was like 90% or so. The pandemic came along and I had some time to reflect. And so I really crystallized these 18 Pong principles, I call them, that help you succeed at any table in life, any table that you will encounter. Mine happens to be a table tennis table, but it could also be a legal desk or a drafting table, whatever profession or vocation you're involved in. And so that was the genesis of the book. And then I interviewed 18 amazing leaders to exemplify these principles.
That's awesome, and you brought back a ton of memories when you mentioned Nolan's name because, yeah, obviously Atari I had an Atari 2600 growing up and played the games in the arcade, Asteroids, Battlezone, and all of that, and then of course, found out later in life, a place that I would frequent a lot was Chuck E. Cheese's, which was also his creation. So I was playing his creations inside another one of his creations. So needless to say, a lifelong fan of what Nolan brought to the world, and it just and to be able to work with him and gain the insights and the creativity and the leadership lessons from him was definitely a gift for you for sure. And I love how you've played this out, and it's true. There's so many different analogies of different sports and leadership. That's why you see, of course, the John Woodens of the world, and there's all so many different leaders in a variety of different entities. But one of the beautiful things that comes across, no matter what that sport is there's a component of discipline, there's a component of strategy, there's a component of understanding the field or the pitch or whatever it happens to be, and you know, setting yourself up for success. Because I find leaders that are successful in life are ones that have a big picture view, can get really narrow focused on a particular matter, but they can also scale back and go, okay, let's look big picture on this. And those are the leaders that time and time again, no matter what's going on in the world, are able to navigate around or through things and continue to lead their organizations or themselves in a way that they don't go through it necessarily unscathed, but they come out of this whatever situation we happen to be facing at that time in history a whole lot better than people that are just scattered and running around and all of that.
Absolutely. And I have my signed Chuck E. Cheese doll right here from Nolan, prized possession. Yeah,
That is beautiful.
yes. I mean that kind of brings up why I believe ping pong, well, I call it the most accessible sport in the world because it brings together so many disparate types of people. It can be relatable to so many different types of people. You can be 9 years old and destroy a 30-year-old professional hockey player, for example, just because you've trained a little longer. And it doesn't really matter so much size, strength, certainly not income, language, culture, religion, anything. It all is equalized at the table tennis table. And speaking of Nolan Bushnell, um, I mean, he was really featured heavily in Pong Principle number 3 when deception is fair game. And that was a fun one because table tennis, there's a lot of deception in that game, a lot of heavy spin. Not only is that difficult by itself, but then you can disguise the spin maybe like a baseball pitcher too. Was that a two-seam fastball or was that a knuckleball? You really have to decide at a split second what's coming at you and then react to that. Regardless of your bias or your agenda, you have to really address what's on the ball. And then, and only then, you'll be able to assert your own plans on top of that, right? And so obviously there's ethical and moral guidelines that come into play with deception. And there's rules about that. Every game has rules. But within the rules, there's plenty of ways to creatively deceive and play with the ball and the opponent. Quarterback sneak in football, it's built into the name of the phrase, right? You're sneaking the ball. They think it's going this way. The quarterback takes it that way. So with Nolan Bushnell, this is a story about Pong, relevant enough, right? When they were developing that in the 70s. And he was a pioneer, Atari, and they created that breaking game of Pong. It was really popular, but it was a small company he had just founded, and they could only pump out a few thousand units, maybe in a week or so. Meanwhile, his competitors, these big more established gaming companies, were simply buying a Pong unit, a little arcade unit, or home unit, taking it apart, reverse engineering it, ordering the same parts, slapping it together, selling it. And like they were outselling him 5-1. So he was losing a lot of market share on his rightful property. And it wasn't even time to do a lawsuit because that would have dragged on forever. And this was like a daily matter. So simple solution for a creative mind like Nolan Bushnell, he ordered the parts from the factory and intentionally had them mislabel the little semiconductor, the little multi-legged units you put in the circuit board, mislabel them. So number 17 would be labeled 9, number 38 would be labeled 16. And then back at his factory at Atari, they knew which ones were which. So they would reassemble in the right way. So they had no problem for Atari. Meanwhile, all of his competitors were building beautifully constructed units that did nothing. They were just a blank screen when you plugged it in. And so they had warehouses full of unusable product and they just poof, went away. And and it was perfectly within his rights. He was doing nothing wrong. Hey, anyone can label however they want. But if you're being unscrupulous on the other side, boy, did they get tasteful of their own medicine. And I thought that was a beautiful example of when deception is fair play.
Some people would call that karma, and yeah, and yeah, that just the problem solving and looking at the situation and going, okay, here's this. What can we do about this? All right, well, we'll just we'll change a couple things around. They're still getting all the parts. They just obviously don't know this circuit board from this one, and they're just following the orders on it instead of actually using some deductive reasoning, going, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. And you know thankfully for Atari, they were able to do that. And like I said, just thinking about this at the moment, I'm just flooded with memories of different things, even to the morning, a Sunday morning, when my dad went to pick up when Pac-Man first came out on the Atari. And that was such a gigantic deal. It was the first time that a real arcade game that was number one on the planet was coming home, to be able to play that game at home. And now it looked different and all that, but it still had the same premise of the game and all of that. And just that was, no, thank you for that gift, because it's just an amazing thing, that whole that system, and the bazillion hours that, and hundreds of joysticks that we broke and all that. That'd be my only complaint. It would be like, those joysticks, but they could have been built a little bit better, but then again, it created the opportunity to buy more joysticks. So wait
Maybe
a
that was,
minute.
yeah, part of the strategy.
Maybe that was the plan. Exactly. That's the reason why pantyhose rip too. It's like, yeah, they can make pantyhose that will last, 100 years, but no one will buy them after one pair. So it's like, we got to do something about that. But so throughout the book, and all those conversations you had, is there a couple that stand out to you that and obviously you've been a student of the game for a very long time, and I always say a student of leadership, because we never, from my opinion, we never master leadership. We're always a student. We're always learning new things. But in those conversations and all those leaders that you talk to in putting the book together, anyone stand out to you that was kind of made you think a little bit more on something?
Wow. Yeah, all these principles are kind of like my children, so it's hard to pick a favorite, but certainly depending on the situation you're facing, there are a few that are always, to me, really great for the situation. One of my favorites would be Pong Principle number 6. What's your ready position? And you kind of touched on it earlier, where you were talking about how great leaders are able to shift their stance. They can move back a little bit for a different perspective, be ready for whatever comes their way. Ready position is about, once you have the really optimal stance, and in table tennis, it would be a certain, if you're a right-handed player, it would be a little bit toward the left of the table, because your forehand can reach further than your backhand. You'd be crouched low on the balls of your feet, paddle up kind of in the middle of your vision. So that way, if you have a fast serve to your backhand or your forehand, you're able to go either way really quickly. And it depends if it's a deep serve or a shallow serve, you're able to handle either one pretty quickly. That's kind of an example of ready position in table tennis. You're basically not trying to read the future, but you're ready for the future in the best possible way based on probabilities, right? Translate that to business and leadership. You'll never read the future, but you can master the probabilities and give yourself a stance of readiness, so that whatever comes your way, you'll optimize your resources and your relationships and your supply chain, so that you won't be caught with your pants down, basically, whatever happens. Um, and in this case, I talked to Will Shortz, who is the New York Times crossword puzzle editor, which, may sound just like, oh, that's a fun position. But I mean, that's the top of the mountain in the entire puzzling world. That's probably the most prestigious position in the world for a crossword puzzle, right? Ever since he was a kid, he was making little games for his mom and his brother. And then he went through school and he would do practice tests for his classmates. And he went to law school, but his heart wasn't really into it. He had gotten a degree in enigmatology from Indiana, University of Indiana. He made that own degree up, the study of puzzles, basically. So his example is he was always ready for any opportunity that came along in the gaming world because he was always out there practicing the craft because he loved it, he was good at it, and he didn't just settle there. He would go out and start a little games committee in his community, or he would join a gaming club, and then word would spread. Oh, we need a guy to run this contest because there's a new hotel opening up in Connecticut, and they want to run a puzzling contest. Oh, who's that young kid again who's really good at? Oh yeah, Will Shorts, right? So his name got out there, but he kept feeding it even throughout his whole career, even when he's in his 40s, 50s, 60s, he still runs contests. He would go to Europe and help them run a puzzling contest. So he would keep up with the community. He would keep up with the latest developments in the game. And he also revered the history of the game. Apparently, he has the world's largest collection of historical gaming books going back to the 1500s, thousands of different volumes, and then magazines in the 1900s. And so he's ready for any kind of gaming related opportunity because his radar is always scanning the horizon for developments, right?
Well, not only is he a creator, but he's also a caretaker of gaming. You can tell that by him, having the largest collection of books going back to the 1500s. He's obviously passionate about it, but I look at him as well as gifted and creative as is he's a caretaker of the art or the principle of gaming. It's like, and I mentioned this the other day in a conversation I had with my brother. We were talking about baseball announcers, and there are great baseball announcers, the heavily revered. There's some that are really good at what they do, but they're not going to erect a statue of that person at a stadium, because they're just, they're really good, but they're not, Hall of Fame type of caliber in their skills. And again, not knocking anybody on that, but there are certain, and you see this in every sport and you see it throughout life as well, where you come across people that are really gifted at what they do, but they're honoring that craft. They're like, okay, I'm here doing this now. I won't always be here, but I'm going to be the best I can be and really show appreciation and care for this, whatever they do. And when I come across people like that, it's always, you kind of stand back in awe, and you just appreciate what they do because you can tell, it's deep within them. And I always celebrate to people that, yes, they went to law school. They got their degree, or they went in this, but then they realized, no, what, my passion, my gift to this world is this, and I'm going to do this. Even when I'm sure their parents or friends are going, what are you doing? You're walking away from a law degree and you're doing this. Yeah, but this that they're doing is a bigger gift to humanity than them being another attorney that's trying cases or studying law or anything like that. So I always celebrate people like that go, you know what, I'm going to do this because I think it's going to make a bigger impact on this world.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I'm with you right there too. Um, Not always easy to do,
No.
right? Because we all have our routines, our ruts, our responsibilities. But it is inspiring to see when people can make that work for them. And it's not always able, it can be hard to quote, live your dream, but there are ways to optimize and maximize your talents wherever you are in whatever profession and just make it more fun and more meaningful if you could bring it in, right? I remember I was working at these large agencies in the early 2000s, digital strategy and content strategy. And even there, it was enjoyable, but it was a job. But we had a ping pong table. We had three actually in a spare wing. So we actually had a league. I think it was probably 25 players in our office because we had 300 people there. So we had almost 10% of the office was really into table tennis, and a lot of foreign workers too, who really had an enthusiasm for the game because in, say, India and China and Japan, they are even more enthusiastic about table tennis than we are here in America. And we had two leagues. We had an A league and a B league. And it was a great, like, not only competition friendly, but at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, hitting for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it was better than an espresso for me. Gets the blood flowing, gets the brain working. I mean, they call it chess at 80 miles an hour because there's a lot of strategy in table tennis, but you got to be lightning quick. So it's really, it activates your brain as well as your body. What a great way to take a break, come back. And I was so refreshed in the afternoon after playing a little bit.
It's a great way to do it, and and you mentioned something it's a connector. And I remember because I worked during the dot-com era. I was in Chicago working for IT companies and all of that, and we had the H-1B visa. Was a big thing that the United States had because we did not have enough IT professionals. So we had people coming from all over the world, but India, China, Japan for sure, and when you have cultural differences, I have empathy for people that are uprooting wherever they live and they go somewhere that's completely foreign to them and having to adapt and get used to things and all of that. But when you have this connector, which happens to be table tennis, and you have people that are from different parts of the world, but they're all playing together, it's a reminder of despite nuances and agendas and political things and all the things that we see in the world today. It's like when you have a connector like the game of table tennis, that can change things. And sometimes I think, what, when you have these, competing parties, it's like, okay, grab the paddle, start playing a game. It, and they have fun, they're laughing and all that kind of good stuff. And it realizes, okay, it can be a great diffuser too. It's like if there's tense things going on or you have a really tough day, like you said, you get that blood flowing and all those things come into play. It can reduce the stress of a situation and get you to a more calm state, which at a calm state, you're able to be a little bit more agile, be able to see things a little more clearly. And from there, that's when breakthroughs can happen or easing of tensions or rebuilding relationships, you name it. It's definitely an amazing game that has given so much to you and a ton of people around this globe. So, Justin, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you, the book, and all this other amazing work you're doing?
Yeah, it's been fun to talk. You could just go to pingpongleadership.com, find out more about the book and me. My contact info is there, or find me on LinkedIn, Justin Bookey. Easy enough.
Yeah, we'll definitely have that in the show notes. So, Justin, thank you again for being on the show and the history lessons and the reminiscing about the dot-com era, Atari, all those other fun stuff. Had a blast with this one. So, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.